Two things we can all relate to. That's powerful performances and social media. Many of us remember feeling mesmerized when Cynthia Erivo blew us out of the water with her rendition of I'm Here in the color purple, with each note articulating the pain and power of Black women. And then we subsequently spent hours trying to hit those high notes. Or maybe that was just me. And then there's Viola Davis, who made me want to stand in the same spot with her for the next 18 years as tears and snot run down her face. And then there's Laverne Cox, who, in her groundbreaking roles, remind us all that trans women's rights are women's rights. You see, the beauty about social media is that it showcases our multiple selves and all our complexity and indifference. But these stories unearth a sense of humanity in us, something that we can connect to and, well, tweet about. And then there's social media. And the beauty of social media is that it brings forth these new ideas, new ways of thinking. There's these performances that happen on social media that we're not always prepared for. So remember when your cousin made you scroll through those 50 pictures of her amazing trip to Italy? Social media found you. And then when you were tagged in that Facebook Live video when you were at that party in Bushwick, yeah, that one. And then your grandma called you up and says, baby, don't put those videos of yourself with those red cups on the book face. Social media found you again. You see, I've gotten up close and personal with this issue. I'm a social worker and a digital qualitative researcher. And what that means is that I deeply value social justice, and I work alongside with communities, marginalized communities, to impact change. I use social media to learn more about those communities and to answer questions like, how can we prevent more murders, or how can we intervene in trauma in ways, in healthy ways, using social media? You see, I've been interested in gang violence for all of my academic career, but I didn't start there. I went to graduate school at the University of Chicago to study urban education. And I was having these amazing conversations with young Black and Latino youth about high school. But then some of them wouldn't come to school. And then I found out, well, they were afraid to cross the gang line, or their sister, brother, cousin had been shot or killed the day before. How could they focus on school, test scores, and grades when they were consumed with surviving? And so I took a moment to realize that the stories that I heard about them were not the stories I was reading about in the news. I do a lot of work in Chicago, and many of you are probably familiar with what's happening in Chicago because it's always in the news. Now, there's some good stuff. Remember when Oprah ended her award-winning show after 25 years of success? Or perhaps when former President Barack Obama accepted the presidency in Grant Park. That was an amazing night. And then there's the movie Chirac, which showcases gang members and ironclad doors and single mothers and kids dodging bullets just to get to school. But newspapers reduce these stories to a bunch of bodies, right? Telling you a bunch of numbers of individuals that are killed or shot over the course of a week or a weekend or a month or a year. But these numbers don't tell the whole story. And then we can learn a lot about Chicago's violence via social media, or we think we can. Recently, President Trump likened Chicago's violence to carnage that's in need of federal intervention. But what's the narrative in this tweet? Is this tweet about ending gun violence, or Is it simply a political strategy? Who benefits from this narrative of Chicago? Well, as an eager young academic, I was seeking to do that next big research study. And I was so compelled to do something that really got at root causes of violence. And so I was sitting in my office in my first academic position at the University of Michigan, and this headline came flashing across my screen, and it said, "Chicago's gun-toting gang girl, Little Snoop." Now, of course, like many of you, I was rather dismayed and confused by the sensational title, but then I thought, this might be the ticket to my next research study. So I dug a little deeper, and there was this quote that really stuck with me, and it read, "She became kind of a mythic figure on social media, a diminutive, gap-toothed girl who was nobody's bitch. She was purported to have killed at least twice, avenging murdered friends, the first time when she was just 14. And I thought to myself, well, what if I did a study that really looked at social media communication and its impact on violence? And so I ran to the academic literature seeking for answers, and there was very little information on this new phenomenon. And so with colleagues, together, we sought to carve out a new field of study which examines the relationship between social media communication and gang violence. Now, in order to do this well, we really needed to understand the language, right? And we needed a case study that really was emblematic of what was happening on social media and the gang violence that was taking place in Chicago. And so we focused on Jakira Barnes, a deceased 17-year-old woman that was known as a shooter or a hitter in her gang, which is a position that's rarely occupied by young women. And she also had a really amazing Twitter following. She was quite active on Twitter. And so in all of my eagerness, I dug into her tweets like an archaeologist searching for bones, looking for those tweets that I thought would be aggressive or threatening, and well, I found plenty. Then I found bodies. You see, I came across a set of tweets from the gun-toting gang girl that I wasn't expecting. On March 29th, 2014, her good friend, Rashawn Little B. Shaw, was shot and killed by the Chicago police. And on that day, Jakira took to Twitter to express grief and pain and trauma. She said things like, "The pain is unbearable. My pain ain't never been told. Why the police have to kill my broski?" You see, I missed these tweets because I wasn't looking for them. I had internalized a single narrative about Jakira because of what I read about her, because of what I read about Chicago, and it fundamentally changed how I approached my research. And so I finally woke up and realized that if I was going to do this research well, I needed a holistic process that centers the voices of youth. And that if I wanted to have larger impact, well, I needed to be able to look at a lot of data quickly. And so I created the SAFE Lab, which is a research initiative that brings together voices and expertise from youth, social workers, and computer scientists. And together we are creating tools that can prevent and detect violence that starts on social media. And so in our research process, we always start with youth, who are community experts. They translate our data and tell us the story within a story. So for example, we learned that a gun emoji, a devil face, and a man running is a prime example of a potential threat that we should pay attention to. Then, with all those insights from young people, our social workers look for clear and discernible patterns in the data. One thing that we found is that expressions of grief and loss oftentimes come before a more aggressive and threatening tweet. Perfect time for an intervention. And then our computer scientists take all of those important ideas, those deep insights from youth and social workers, and then use machine learning or artificial intelligence to detect and predict these instances on social media. That then allows us to work with community-based organizations that are on the ground doing this good violence work. We can support their efforts. But we're constantly told the story about Jakira and people like her that reduced her to a bloodthirsty killer that felt no pain. But what I learned from her social media is that violence is complex and that there are multiple opportunities to intervene. Now, this isn't to negate the fact that she did commit some crime and there are families still grieving. But there are multiple opportunities to intervene. When Jakira told us that the pain was unbearable, we could have asked why. When she told us no one understands her pain, we could have asked her about her friends. And when she said the police killed her friend, well, we could all challenge those policing strategies. When will we start to see the humanity in kids like Jakira? When will we see young Black and Latino youth as children and not as public safety risks? We can use social media to get a more complete story, to see nuance in language and behavior that is hard to understand in face-to-face interactions. And so I want to invite you all today and join me to tell more complete stories. We can use our diverse lenses to retell powerful narratives about marginalized communities. We saw this happen in Moonlight, in Hidden Figures, in Fences. And so in borrowing from Viola Davis, let's continue to exhume those bodies and retell our stories.